never sleep again.
Every day's a learning experience.
Yes, I know.
And hello, everyone. Welcome back to Podcast Part 3, the Part 3 podcast. He is Will, and I am Sam, and we welcome you back for another week of talking about movies that came after two other movies. I can't think of a better way to put it. And it's another Will Morey selection this week.
So it's weird and a little disappointing.
You're getting better. Every week you're getting better. This is your journey, and I'm grateful to be on it with you. This week we watched A Nightmare on Elm Street 3: Dream Warriors.
We're the Dream Warriors.
Oh yeah.
Don't want to dream no more.
Oh yeah, fuck yeah, Dokken. They're actually in the credits, not like Batman Forever. No, this is I mean, say what you will, whatever else. It's got a sick theme song.
That song fucking rips. It just rips.
The Dream Warriors themselves do not live up to the hype of their theme song.
No, they do not.
If I'm being perfectly honest, they go down pretty quick.
Yeah, we'll get into it. This is a movie that promises a lot and delivers very little.
Yeah, its heart's in the right place. I get what they're going for, and it is definitely like one of the quintessential sets the tone for the franchise movies.
Yeah.
So, for a little background, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original, it came out in 1984, and it's was written and directed by Wes Craven, who at that point was already a big name in horror. He'd already done Last House on the Left, he'd done The Hills Have Eyes, and I think he had been in a little bit of a slump before then, and then he teamed up with then very indie studio New Line Cinema to make this kind of out there like twist on slasher movies, because at this point the slasher genre was already like kind of peaking, and the studios were starting to be like embarrassed that they were successful off of them. So I think 84 is when they did Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter, where they killed Jason the first time around, and Halloween was in its dormant state after Season of the Witch. They hadn't brought back Michael Myers. So Nightmare on Elm Street, for those of you that don't know, is about a child murderer who was killed by the mob, and he comes back as a burned dream demon who gets revenge on the parents that murdered him by killing their children in their dreams. So don't fall asleep. And, probably the most famous character in horror cinema that isn't like Dracula.
He's up there on like the great movie monsters, and up there with Jason in the same period. And even Michael Myers to a certain extent, although, we've talked about Michael Myers a lot and how he kind of doesn't fit into the mold, even though everyone shoves him in there.
Well, Michael, has the benefit of he has like the best movie. If they're like fantasy football teams, he's the guy that like got to draft first. So he got like the best player, but then it's kind of a big drop off after that. And then Jason's consistently your like fourth best player. Like they're not good. Friday the 13th movies aren't good, but they are consistent. And then the Nightmare movies are interesting because I think there's less of them than the other ones, and than the other franchises. There's less Nightmares than there are Halloweens or Jason movies, I think, of like the big ones. And they don't have a ton of reboots. They've been kind of off. They haven't made a lot of new stuff with Freddy in recent years. No. And the big difference, I think, is that the main villain is a character. Like, he has a personality.
Right.
And that's and he has supernatural abilities, and there's a lot more the visuals and the production are much more imaginative. Even before Freddy became like the wisecracking anti-hero, the Deadpool of horror, he still had like this inventive dream world that he lived in, full of like, he controlled the environment, and it was much more effects heavy than you would find in Halloween or Friday the 13th. It was much more on the level of like an Evil Dead or a Hellraiser in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives filmmakers just sort of carte blanche to do whatever wild things they want. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen the Renny Harlin Nightmare on Elm Street, which I think is 4, or is it 5?
That is 4, The Dream Master.
Right.
And 5 is Dream Child. That's directed by Stephen Hopkins, who did The Ghost in the Darkness and Predator 2.
Yeah, and Predator 2. But I know that Renny Harlin like took a lot of inspiration from a Chinese ghost story and like sort of a lot of like Asian martial arts supernatural stuff, and like Freddy kind of gives them the ability to do that. You can't sort of take that stylistic approach to a Michael Myers or or Jason. I mean, you could, but it would just be so far out of bounds, and
I mean, it would be Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday.
Right, exactly. Or even Freddy versus Jason, which was directed by a Hong Kong action director.
Freddy versus Jason is still half a Freddy movie, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Oh, that movie rules. I don't care what anyone says.
It is so
that
fun.
movie is so much better
fun.
than it has any right to be. You think of every movie that's ever lived in development hell for 10, 20 years and how it kind of ended up sort of flopping onto the screen. That movie it's miles from perfect. It's barely even good, but it is so much fun.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that, as it is with almost every Nightmare movie, a big part of that is Robert Englund. Robert Englund, just a character actor. He'd been in a bunch of small parts, and then he got cast, I think he was like a Broadway guy, and he got cast as Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street, and they very wisely knew to bring him back for part 2 and then onward. And Freddy Krueger is inseparable from that performance.
Yeah.
Like Robert Englund, there are very few characters that I believe can only be played by one actor. Like, I really think that if you're doing Freddy Krueger, you need Robert Englund, or you at least need the best deep fake you can get.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because they tried with a different actor, and Jackie Earle Haley is as good a casting choice as you could possibly make, but it just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah. I mean, I think I tried watching the remake at one point, and I couldn't get through it. I mean, and part of it was just that it did the thing that a lot of these horror remakes do, where it just sort of is the original movie just with modern special effects, and it was like, what is this bringing to the table that I need,
Well, they try this whole fake out for the first half where it may be that Freddy was falsely accused, and they also make it that the thing he's accused of isn't murder, it's just molestation, which somehow makes you feel weirder. And I think the big problem that I think this isn't Jackie Earle Haley's fault, they designed the makeup to be a more realistic burn effect. So he kind of looked like Supreme Leader Snoke. Like, he has like no real nose or lips, and he kind of his mouth is always in like that turned down like beaker from the Muppets thing.
Right.
So it just kind of limited his expressiveness, and they've said that like they designed the original Freddy Krueger skin to kind of just look like the surface of a pizza, and like the cheese all stretched out, and that's not a real burn victim, but it works so well for the character.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it works better because you're playing with dreams. And this is a character that's a nightmare. You have to kind of make him feel surreal and strange and a little more off-putting than what a real burn victim would look like. It has to feel a little larger than life and a little more like, what exactly am I looking at? And you kind of can't get the features right.
Like, he's a demon. He's a supernatural monster.
Yeah, I think if it looks too real, I think it doesn't work for what Freddy's powers are.
You don't want to put, like, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake, it's got a lot of supernatural stuff, but it kind of feels more like the dream world from Inception. It's a little too grounded. It's a little too clean,
Yeah.
You can't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling. So, going back to the original, huge hit. Like, one of the biggest, most successful independent movies ever made, I think, and still is, like, relative to budget.
And made New Line as an actual studio.
And so they dive right in on a sequel in 1985, Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And that's like an odd movie.
Very weird.
We've talked about we talked about this a lot with Michael Myers, how the horror villains work better when there are some rules to them. Yeah. Like, and this is the best example is, don't fall asleep. You can pull stuff out of the dream world. You can pull people in. There's rules to this supernatural world. They hadn't figured out those rules in Freddy's Revenge. So it's more about Freddy trying to possess this kid and sort of come into the real world through him, and it leads to this ridiculous sequence where he's like running around a pool party, just like things are supernaturally catching on fire, like Carrie, and like a dude like tries to talk him down, like, dude, it's okay, you don't be angry, and then like he starts killing everyone. And famously, Freddy's Revenge has also got a great deal of gay subtext. That's I've seen it. It's barely subtext. It's mostly text.
Mostly text. Yeah.
It's kind of the most interesting part of the movie. Like, the lead guy gives a really interesting performance, and he's it's one of the few times there's a male protagonist in one of these movies.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. As a male final girl.
Scream King. Or
Scream
Queen,
King.
or Scream. His documentary he made is called Scream Queen. So.
Right.
Also, Freddy's Revenge was directed by, I think his name's Jack Shoulder, who did later on did The Hidden.
Oh, okay.
And he famously, I think in the Never Sleep Again documentary, he says he didn't really like the first one, which is always a good mindset to go into a sequel. That's how you get Exorcist 2.
Right, that's a John Borman.
John Borman specifically saying, I did not like The Exorcist at all. Yes, I will do Exorcist 2.
Famous lunatic John Borman.
Oh, John Borman, yeah. And yeah, so Freddy's Revenge, kind of a stumble for the franchise. It's got its fans, but it definitely feels like an outlier compared to like 3, 4, 5, 6, and so forth. And then that led to New Line trying to get Wes Craven back. Like, they kind of just went forward with the franchise without him, and I think he was really unhappy with that. So they brought him back, and he wrote the original script with co-writer Bruce Wagner. But before that, and I literally just learned this like 10 minutes ago, Will, and I'm going to share it with you. This comes from an article in Fangoria in 1986, and it's about, apparently, when they were developing Dream Warriors, there were 2 other scripts that were written. I'm not sure if they were written, like, with the backing of New Line.
Right.
John Saxon and Robert Englund both wrote their own scripts for a third Nightmare film.
Oh my god. I have to read these. I have to find them.
Would you like to hear what John Saxon's script would have been about?
Yes, I do.
It's called How the Nightmare on Elm Street All Began, and would have been a prequel. Freddy would have ultimately turned out to have been innocent, or at least set up for the murders by Charles Manson.
Oh my...
Who, along with his followers, would have been the main culprit for the murders. Freddy would have been forced by the mob of angry parents to make a confession of the crimes, which would enrage them further. After they lynch Freddy, he comes back to avenge his wrongful death by targeting the parents' children.
Oh my god.
All right. I have some notes. Like, Manson, huh?
Wait a minute, but is Springville, right? That's where
Springwood. It's in
Springwood.
It's, I think, Ohio.
Why would what?
I don't know. It maybe it's just I don't know. And
Did the
then
Manson children go on a little jaunt, a cross-country jaunt?
I mean, I would love to see a road movie with Tex Watson and Big Ethel and Sexy Sadie all following Charlie Manson around, but I think that's just the Devil's Rejects.
Yeah, I think that's exactly. That's a Rob Zombie movie. I can't imagine anyone would be like, well, yeah, we'll go with this. It takes away all the supernatural stuff and just is a Manson movie.
I don't know if people would want Freddy to be less than what he is. I don't think we need to go back and see only pre-murder, like pre-burning Freddy.
No, I think that's the wrong tracks.
Thank you, John Saxon. We will get back to you. We also have Robert Englund's treatment called Freddy's Funhouse, where the protagonist would have been Tina Gray's older sister. Tina was the girl that's killed in the, like, where she's dragged up the wall and the ceiling and stuff in the first one. And it would be about Tina's older sister coming back to Springwood to investigate how her sister died. And in the script, Freddy had claimed the 1428 Elm Street house for his own in the dream world, setting up booby traps like Nancy did against him. And according to Englund, part of it later ended up being used in the pilot episode of Freddy's Nightmares after the script had been lying around unused for a few years. So that's a little closer to a sequel.
Yeah, I like that idea of, like, there's real estate in the dream world that's real. It's in the real world. That's kind of a cool idea. That
It's like the dream world as an environment that isn't just the domain of Freddy's. I think that would be that's interesting. That, like, it's the dream world is a shared space we all subconsciously go to.
Yeah, which is, I mean, if you look at the poster for this movie, that's kind of what the poster is implying is the movie, that they're going to the dream world to do something.
I mean, that's what they planned on doing, but they get it falls apart pretty quick because it's only in the last, like, half hour of the movie that they actually get to the dream warrioring. Yeah. So those original interesting ideas aside, they went to Wes Craven and Bruce Wagner, who wrote the original script and is pretty close to what the final product was. I think a lot of the characters were slightly different. I think Dr. Neil was younger.
Okay.
And we'll get into Dr. Neil in a little bit. You and I have some thoughts on him.
Yes.
And then Wes Craven wasn't going to direct. He was busy working on Deadly Friend. So they brought on Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont. Frank Darabont, we all know from Shawshank Redemption and Walking Dead. And Chuck Russell would go on to direct The Mask.
Yep.
And the remake of The Blob, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah, I just saw that for the first time last year, and that's a great movie. It's great. Movie.
Underrated so 80s remake. It's some cool effects, great cast, and yeah, I think it's getting kind of rediscovered now. I think Shout Factory put out a Blu-ray of it. So they came on. Chuck Russell directed. It was Chuck Russell had one previous writing credit, and this was his directorial debut. He'd previously written the script for Dreamscape, as it turns out.
Yes.
So this was in his wheelhouse. And I know that it was like a really tough production, and I think they changed some of the stuff on the fly, like character stuff, and it kind of shows. This movie feels it's dancing between the kind of straight horror of the first two and the real fantasy horror of 4 and 5. And I'd say, like, 4, it's maybe not a better movie, but it has better set pieces.
Right.
Like 4 has the one where the girl gets turned into a cockroach. Which is
right. Yeah. Which is
that's
really
kind of a famous one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you can tell. Like, there's so many places where it feels like it's going to go in one direction and then decides to forget what it's doing and jump tracks and do something completely different. And my problem with this movie is that it's promising one thing and then it decides to sort of just do a kind of standard issue slasher. And I kind of want to make it clear. I like this movie. I don't think it's a bad movie, but, like, there's so much promise to it that it just can't live up to, either because of budgetary reasons or whatever. But it's really a problem on the character level, I think.
Well, they made a very strange choice for who ultimately the protagonist of the film is.
Yeah.
For start, I mean, like, you bring back Nancy. from the first movie. She's now like a grad student, and she's come to this asylum to help these kids who are like what she knows to be the last of the Elm Street kids. And they're, desperately trying not to sleep. They have all these different ways of coping. One of them's on drugs. One of them like burns herself with cigarettes. And she works with their current, I guess he's a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Dr. Neil something.
Yeah.
Not Neil Jordan.
No,
that's the crying game. I have him as Dr. Neil in my notes. And
yeah,
it's like half the movie is about Nancy convincing this guy that Freddy is real and these kids are actually in danger. And that comes at the end, and they have like a weird sort of romance. And it's like ultimately he's the one that has to is the one that stops Freddy. And he has this subplot where he's meeting this nun who tells him Freddy's origin. And he's just the most milquetoast character. He's got nothing going on.
Yeah, I mean, the only interesting thing about him is that he's well-meaning. He genuinely...
he's not a bad guy.
No, but that's it. And there's nothing interesting about him. And you halfway through my notes, I'm like, why isn't this guy and Nancy combined as the same character?
Yeah, this movie is like when you pass the torch from the old cast to the new one, but they decided to cast someone older than the original lead.
Exactly. And it's this is a movie designed for teenagers. The main cast is teenagers, and really the hero is this 30-something psychiatrist. What are we doing here?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time with this guy at the expense of a cast of relatively likable teen characters.
Right.
Patricia Arquette's in this movie, and she's great. And,
yeah.
You like all of them. I like the puppeteer kid. I like Roland.
Yeah,
I like Jennifer Rubin's great.
And yeah, that was also what I didn't understand either. It's you basically have the Breakfast Club teaming up to get to take Freddy, and it's that's your movie. What the fuck?
Yeah, this needed, and it is kind of a Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's call it. It's in the same neighborhood.
Yes.
And if that was this movie, if it was this movie needed some of that Goonies or Stephen King energy to it.
Yeah.
And I think Darabont and Russell were probably trying to bring that, because that's definitely Frank Darabont's adapted a ton of Stephen King.
Yeah.
He obviously likes that kind of storytelling, but it's and it also I'd kind of forgotten how little Freddy is in this.
Well, and what I do like about it is that because there's so little of Freddy, he actually is genuinely scary when he shows up.
He's scary, except they forget to modulate his voice half the time.
Yeah, that's true.
So sometimes he's like this, and sometimes he's like this. It's sometimes in the same scene.
Yeah, but what I want this movie to be is Aliens meets Dreamscape. I want Nancy to be Ripley and sort of getting these people together and being I'm gonna train you in how to kill Freddy or how to fight in your dreams, and then you kind of go into the dream world where they're trying to rescue someone and blah blah blah. But they're the movie just kind of does nothing for such a good portion of it, and then by the time you start getting somewhere, it's over.
Well, and it's you're also all this time spent with Dr. Neil and the nun, Ghost Nun. That's the driver of learning how do we stop Freddy.
Right.
And all of that should have been on the kids and Nancy.
Exactly.
And not about learning Freddy didn't get a proper funeral, and that's why he's so pissed off.
Well, I mean, and that's fine, again, as long as, Nancy's the one or the kids are figuring it out. I mean, you start the movie and you think Patricia Arquette is going to be your main character, and she's not.
No, she's not at all. Yeah, it's so strange. There's a lot of the stuff in Weston Hills, the sanitarium.
Yeah,
is a lot of that's really effective. It reminded me a lot of the when it's just the kids, being forced to take medication and these doctors don't believe them, and there's the There's, the sleazy orderly and the older nurse who's or doctor who's a jerk who says, this is all all of this is a product of your own repressed guilt.
Yeah.
A lot of that reminded me of like the first half of The Exorcist.
Sure.
When like they're still trying to figure out what's wrong with this girl, and they have her going for like spinal taps, and she's like, different doctors and stuff, and it's kind of the scariest stuff in the movie because they're doing it to this kid.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that's all great, and like the cat and the teenagers, they're all types that we've seen before, but they're all kind of believable. They feel like real kids, and they all have like distinct personalities that you kind of pick up right away, and that's all through like performance and just visuals. And then the movie just forgets about them to hang out with Dr. Neil, and it's like, and part of it is also it's the Predator 2 problem, where you spend half the movie somebody investigating Predator 2, but it's like, we're seeing Predator 2, we know what the problem is.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a lot of the movie is these characters all puzzling over why these kids are committing suicide, when we as the audience, and Nancy as what should be the lead, know full well it's Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, and again, I feel sort of bad shitting on this movie because I genuinely like a lot of it, but it's just the promise of this movie is just the movie does not live up to it. And
I don't think we're shitting on it because I really like this movie. It was a fun movie to watch.
Yeah.
And I've never had the passion for the Nightmare movies that I have for the Jason movies, but they are nothing if not ambitious. Yeah. And I always really I like this. I like 1, I like 3, 4 is fun to watch. New Nightmare is like...
New Nightmare is the best of the bunch. I mean, aside from the first one, New Nightmare is just so good.
Oh yeah, I also read Wes Craven had the idea for New Nightmare that was going to be like Nightmare 2.
Oh wow!
And the studio said no, like that was like way too meta for 1985. But he just kind of sat on it, and then when they kind of came back to him and said, "Hey, we want you to bring you back. We want to make it right. I know you haven't been happy with the franchise." That's when he did New Nightmare, which paved the way for Scream.
Right. Well, and it's funny because I don't think New Nightmare would work quite as well as the second movie. I think it only works as if Freddy has become sort of an iconic character.
Yeah, it would actually, like, if you were doing it as the second movie, it should be more like they're making a movie about Freddy Krueger. They're making Stab,
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that was what it was originally when he was writing it. But
this is a movie that definitely set the tone for where they wanted to go. But it's, I think, based on, like, not everyone loves 4, 5, and 6, but they're leaning into the things that work in this one because they all center on like a group of kids. The set pieces are bigger. There's more Freddy. Your adult counterparts are supporting if they're in there at all. And so, like, yeah, I think what we're saying is I like Nightmare 3. When it does that stuff, it does it probably the best of anything in the franchise, but there's not enough of it. And we're stuck with with this really uninteresting protagonist
who's just hanging out with John Saxon, he has no like real connection to John Saxon, so it doesn't make sense why they're together anyway.
Yeah, it's he's the character that is in the least danger throughout the entire movie. He's never in any danger except maybe at the end where Freddy's skeleton comes to life. I guess Freddy can do that.
Yeah. It becomes a Jason and the Argonauts skeleton, which was pretty cool. I like the stop motion.
He's got the little angry face. He's got the skeleton angry eyes, which skeletons don't really have unless they're Harryhausen skeletons.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's some fun stuff in this movie. There's some really cool bits. I love I wish I can remember his name. The puppeteer kid's death. That's like intense because it's like scary, all the other kids are screaming at him and they're trying to get someone to like some adult to help them. And no one will help. And it's like, and he's, sleepwalks by and like what he's going through is so horrific. Yeah, that's, that one's great. Jennifer Rubin's death is great with the syringe fingers.
Oh, yeah. And like all of her, the needle marks are all like all
the little track marks are like, hungry mouths. Yeah. Yeah, she has that scene with the like sleazebag orderly who feels like he walked in from a a nightmare or from a Friday the 13th movie.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Toots, I can get you that good medical high.
And I thought he was gonna come back in some way, but he just shows up to be a creep.
I think he's just in there so we don't like him, so that we wouldn't have to have Max manhandling them when Nancy and Dr. Neal get fired. Because we like Max, we like Lawrence Fishburne. You know, he's the only other adult in the movie that isn't a complete piece of shit. Because like Patricia Arquette's mom cannot be bothered with her. She's just like, I don't know. She's going through teenage stuff after she tried to kill herself.
Yeah. She's just joining for attention. Oh my God, what a nightmare that woman is.
Her bag is upstairs. Just get it. I don't know. Get out of my face. And then there's the older doctor who's Dr. Sims, I think her name is, who's just like, you all are just guilty and are jerking off too much. That's why you keep committing suicide in your sleep. And I love that they think these are suicides because, okay, the kid jumping off the tower, okay, that could be read as a suicide. Someone cutting their wrists. Like... How did Jennifer kill herself? They find her with her head hanging out of the television, arms at her sides, like she threw her head through the wall. How is that? Someone please explain that to me. How that's a suicide. That's the famous death. That's Freddy's famous "Welcome to prime time, bitch."
Bitch, yeah.
Has his robot arms jam her into the TV. He was that's the thing. Freddy got cocky. You know, he was doing a good job of making them look like suicides.
And that was the one. Everyone was like, I don't know, this maybe something's up, something supernatural going on.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, when Patricia Arquette's having her first dream, she meets that little girl, and the little girl goes, "Freddy's home." Where was Freddy? Does he go out?
Oh, yeah.
Does he have if it's the dream world, does he have like groceries and stuff that he's got to pick up?
Yeah, I guess so. Or maybe he goes into other people's dreams and then comes back. I don't know.
Well, his boiler room presumably is not in the same location as the 1428 Elm Street house, so he's got to go there to like work on his knife fingers and stuff.
Right. Maybe that was it. He had to go sharpen his knives, or maybe he was trying out other appendages, like a Swiss Army knife kind of thing. You know?
Yeah, it's true. He's very consistent with his look. Freddy.
It's true.
Freddy does not change up his look at all.
No.
Like, Jason changes clothes between every movie. Jason goes from, like, a onesie to slacks sometimes to, like, a jacket, you know. But Freddy has been wearing the same Christmas sweater.
He knows what works for him. Maybe he just got a closet like Doug. It's all just the same thing across the...
He's like a real phony. He's like aging it and pulling at it like when you wanted to look cool, so you made the rips yourself in jeans.
Yeah. He's distressing the sweater at home.
I need them to think I'm scary. It's too clean.
The sink hands in the opening really freaked me out too.
Oh yeah,
whenever it happened, that kind of was freaking me out.
And there's just none of the adults in this movie can just like talk about suicide in a healthy way. Like when Philip, the puppeteer kid's death, afterwards they're like, Philip was a coward. He took the easy way out.
Right.
Fuck him. To like that's what he's saying in like group therapy.
Yeah.
It's like
that
piece of shit gave up.
Oh man.
But there is this thing of like no one is believing these kids. Right. And you would think that would lead to a second half where they are the proactive ones and they have to save the day. But instead it's them. It's watching some boring ass guy realize they're right and watch him go off and save the day while they're running around the dream world.
Yeah, that's it feels like you set up these kids, you know, with agency and emotions and everything, and then just sideline the interesting characters for this boring dude and John Saxon. Like
yeah. And we love John Saxon. We're always happy to see John Saxon, but that could just be John Saxon on his own. or John Saxon with Nancy.
I mean, which makes more sense because there's more like emotional character drama there.
All the plot stuff that Dr. Neil has could be given to Nancy, maybe with help from Max.
Right. Or,
like the orderly who doesn't believe it, but he'll do whatever, he'll do anything to help the kids.
Right, exactly. There's no reason to have this Dr. Neil character. And I spent most of the time this rewatch because it hadn't really occurred to me until this one that this guy was the protagonist, because I had always remembered Nancy being sort of the one who comes in and helps the other kids. I had forgotten completely about this dude. So,
No, yeah, it's crazy. Nancy is like Sidney Prescott in the new Scream. Like she's there, but she's not the lead. She's just there to like impart advice. She's the David Arquette of this movie.
And again, it's like the movie sets it up that like she's gonna help the kids become the quote-unquote dream warriors when, Patricia Arquette pulls her into the dream, which I thought was like a genuinely fun twist on sort of what they had set up in the first movie.
Yeah, teeing up that they have like, it turns out that some people have powers in the dream. Maybe if you've been visited by a dream demon, if you've been pulled into that world, it changes you. But they instead kind of do, everything's just, and I'm gonna assume like this was a movie that definitely, it was New Line, not a big budget. I'm sure they had bigger ambitions with what they wanted to do and were limited by their resources. But it is kind of like they kind of brush off that everyone has superpowers by just like, that's how they see themselves in the dream world.
Right, exactly. I'm bad, but I'm also beautiful. Jennifer Rubens. That was pretty great.
I am the Wizard Master.
This is actually a movie that I think you could remake now, with a bigger budget and, as a legacy Nightmare on Elm Street sequel.
100%. I would love to see them, because Robert Englund is still with us. I think he said he's probably not going to play Freddy again just because it's physically really tough, but you could write it so Freddy isn't always running around. Like he can be more... Like maybe his powers are fading, but he wants to do as much damage as possible before he leaves, before he fades into oblivion.
Yeah.
Give it, I want the Cell with Freddy Krueger.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's what I kind of, the movie promises. And like this idea that you have to go into Freddy's world and deal with like Freddy's shit to like rescue a kid he's kidnapped in the dream world or whatever. And like really like, just go to town on the horror fantasy stuff. I mean, it probably would make it more like a Clive Barker thing, but who cares? That would be really fun and like interesting, and I don't know.
Well, and the Nightmare movies are never playing for the same kind of scares as Halloween or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They've always had a fantasy element to them, and they've just heightened that even more and heightened the humor as Freddy became like a pop culture icon.
Right. Yeah.
And I think all of that's fine. All that can be in there. You'd be a fool to like try and underutilize Robert Englund, because like every single, even New Nightmare, he's got like a sense of humor, and that's probably the one where he's the most menacing.
Yeah.
This movie has some great, the boiler room set at the end with like where Joey's tied up by the tongues. Like that stuff's great. I just want more of that, and I wish that Nightmare 3 maybe had some of the budgetary like scale of 4, 5, and 6, which get to be progressively goofier as they go on.
Which one is the one with Breckin Meyer and the video game? Is
that's 6. That's Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare.
Right.
That's Breckin Meyer's in that. Yaphet Kotto, and cameos from Roseanne and Tom Arnold.
Of course.
Who apparently had sex on the set. I learned that in the Never Sleep Again documentary.
Even better.
But that's the one that, like, if you see it going into it knowing it's, like, essentially a comedy, he like, Freddy basically kills them, like, with Looney Tunes stuff.
Right.
Like the kid who's got the hearing aid, he just starts scratching his fingers on things and like, gives him, like, a demonic hearing aid that makes his head explode. Like, really goofy shit like that. Like a kid's falling out of the sky. You see Freddy drag in like a bed of spikes. He's basically, Wile E. Coyote. like, yeah, 3, 4, and 5 kind of follow the same, or like have a connective thread, because the survivors of this come back in 4. Like the kids, at least,
right.
it's they recast Patricia Arquette, and they brought back Joey and Kincaid, and then they all get killed off in the first act. But
Of course.
and set up these new characters that you then follow into part 5.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a real long time since I've seen those, and I'm not entirely certain I saw all of them all the way through or just watched them on TV.
It's the series I've seen the least
Yeah.
of the big slasher series. I think the ones I've seen the most are the ones that involve Wes Craven in some level.
Yeah.
So like 1, 3, and New Nightmare.
New Nightmare. Yeah, that's same here. I've seen 1 and 3 and New Nightmare a bunch, although I clearly just didn't remember a whole lot about this movie until this rewatch.
I have nothing but fond memories of watching this, and it's not one I watched growing up. We watched it like post-college, I think.
Yeah, no.
It's the perils of watching something with a critical eye. You're gonna dissect it, and that kind of kills the fun a little bit. If I was just watching this, if you and I were just watching this with pizzas and beer, I think we'd have a fine time. It's a fun movie. I think by being critical of it, it seems like we're selling it short.
Yeah,
but
no, absolutely.
This is an essential Freddy movie.
Yeah, and like, even, looking at it with a critical eye and being annoyed at some of the character choices, like, it's, maybe 89 minutes long. Like, it is super
it's
short,
a breeze.
And
it's
it
never
wastes no time. Yeah, and it's never boring.
It's not boring. It's just you're more like, I like that. Give me more of that. Why are we going back to this guy? Why are we watching this guy talk to this nun in an attic?
Yeah, and that's something that's sort of interesting as like a part 3 is you get Freddy's backstory, or like backstory. You get the story of his birth, which is super distressing and weird and like problematic is a good way to explain it.
The bastard son of 100 maniacs.
Maniacs.
They show it in, I think, 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But it's like the young nun trapped in this like Arkham Asylum area, basically, and apparently they just hired every weirdo performance artist they could find to just do their thing. But in that sequence, they keep kind of, as she's getting like mobbed by these patients, they keep kind of closing in on one of them is Robert Englund.
Oh.
Like, one of them's played by Robert, so he's the bad one.
He's the one that oh boy. But it is kind of, it does follow the thing that Jamie Kennedy laid out, that in the third movie it goes sort of, you find out deep lore about the world or the characters, and it's something that we've seen in this podcast, a lot in these movies.
Oh, sure, yeah.
The third movie goes back to the beginning where you learn all sorts of new things.
And unfortunately that might have been like one element too many, because every single one of these movies like comes up with some new convoluted way to stop Freddy.
Right.
And, some of them like expand the mythology, and, like part 6 has the dream demons and the special Freddy glasses that you have to wear to go into the dream world, which are like, that was the put on your 3D glasses now moment in the theaters.
Right.
Absolutely expanded a bit. But I just wish that those plot points had been tied in with Nancy and the Dream Warriors.
Right. I mean, that's the big problem, is that
because that, like you said, that poster shows them all like facing down Freddy, and you never get that moment where all of the kids stand up to Freddy.
Right. Which is what you want, but then it's structured so much like a kind of generic slasher, and again, the movie just promises for it to be something so much more, and it's just not.
Yeah. Like, you want them to stand up to Freddy the way the losers stand up to Pennywise. You want that ending. Yeah. That's all. And yeah, I think the movie needed more of that Goonies, Monster Squad, Stephen King 80s kid horror movie energy, and there's just not enough of that. And that might be why this movie isn't necessarily spoken of on the same level as those other ones.
Yeah, I think it's a movie that doesn't live up to its promise. And the song is really kind of what makes the movie. in a lot of ways, because the song is so cool that you think that that's what the movie is.
And that's the thing with Freddy, like the Nightmare movies, is I think we love Freddy, and everyone has like their famous like set piece, but not like there's rarely any consensus on like what's the best movie in the series besides maybe the first one.
Yeah, I mean, and for me, I think it's really the first one in New Nightmare, and I think part of that is because I like Nancy so much, and I like her, and I like Heather Langenkamp so much that that's probably why.
you like the Langenkamp movies.
Yeah,
you want more Nancy in this to complete the trilogy.
Exactly.
And I like Freddy versus Jason.
Oh yeah, I should say, but that's kind of its own thing, and
it's the last one Robert Englund's done.
That's right.
I would love to see him do one more. You don't need more Halloweens. If they're gonna do Friday the 13th again, it's probably gonna be another reboot. This is one where you could pretty easily make a legacy sequel, even if you don't bring back any characters.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think just the concept is so strong that you could do it, and I think you could probably get a decent sized budget now. I mean, even if you were just making this for like Netflix or HBO Max or whatever, you could probably get a decent sized budget and
totally,
and then go to town.
It's existing IP with like the most iconic character in horror. I mean, if they made a new Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Netflix put that out, the Halloween movies were a huge success. I think it's just, I mean, you and I both know someone somewhere at New Line,
it's trying to make it happen.
They've got it on the board, and they've got Robert Englund's agent's number to call him.
But it's just I just try to ditch the like slasher, the slasher elements of it and make it like a true like horror fantasy thing. Where you
but keep the rated R like gore.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the gore. You want the slasher, the rated R tropes of a slasher movie,
right?
And because it's a singular villain, it gets lumped in with slashers more so than it does with like the likes of Hellraiser or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I just mean make it more going into this other world, as opposed to sort of here are these group of characters who are getting picked off one by one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But I will say, still a fun watch. I had a good time.
Again, I there's nothing I can. I really, really want to hammer the point home. I like this movie a lot.
We're dissecting and criticizing this movie out of love because
exactly.
Because the parts of it that we like, we love them, and the parts of it we don't like, we don't hate. We just wish there was more of what we love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's nothing in it that is that. I mean, because I mean, you and I think feel the same way, is that when a movie is bad, it's really just boring,
Yeah.
And when a movie is boring, that's when it's truly awful. And this was not boring in the least.
And I think one of the things that the Freddy movies have going for them is that none of them are really all that boring.
Yeah.
They're all visually very inventive. They have a captivating villain. They always have very likable protagonists for the most part. And, I think that's their strength. That's why they do stand apart. Whereas I think unless you know the franchise inside and out like I do, the Jason movies might all blend together a little bit.
Yeah, which is how they feel for me. But we'll talk about them when we get to.
Oh yeah, I mean
that one.
It's another 85-minute movie.
They're all very short. Yeah.
Friday the 13th 3D is a breeze. That shouldn't be too tough for you. But yeah, I guess, Will, you did better every time with every movie you pick.
Well, don't put too much on me, because the next time it could be Riddick. I could be choosing Riddick, Sam.
Yeah, but that's different because Riddick is bad.
That's true.
That's not true. Like I know that Riddick. You want to talk about boring? The worst kind of movie is a boring one. That's Riddick. I'm sorry,
Yes.
But any final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think I think this one's absolutely worth watching if you're watching the Nightmare movies, or if you just watch one and want to skip two. I think you should watch two. It's kind of a weird, fun movie, but definitely if you're going through the Nightmare movies, this one is one to watch. 80s horror, this is also one to watch too. It's pretty important on that level.
And as part threes go, it's definitely the one where the franchise kind of figured out the things they like that would become the formula for the next 3 or so movies, go through the bulk of the main continuity of Freddy movies. Like, this was the tone setter, and rightfully so, because the stuff in it that works really well.
Works really well. Yeah, exactly. So
now it's my turn to pick for next week.
That's right. Yeah.
And we do a lot of horror, but I think I'm gonna pick a horror movie. But we're gonna kick it old school, Will. We're going way back. We're going back to the 1930s.
Oh!
This might be the oldest movie that we're gonna watch. I want to watch Universal Studios' Son of Frankenstein.
Cool. I've actually never seen it, so this will be a first-time watch for me. That'll be great.
A lot of people haven't. Obviously Universal Monsters. You got Dracula. You got Frankenstein. You got the Wolfman. You got the Invisible Man. Frankenstein's one of the most famous ones. It's one of the best ones. Bride of Frankenstein is also very famous and very weird, both by James Whale. But less people know Son of Frankenstein. And it's such an interesting movie because it's a different director. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he's like a workman, like one of those like early 20th century guys who's got like 50 credits across the 40s and like 30s and 40s. And it's got like the horror trifecta in it because it's got Boris Karloff, Basil Rathbone, and Bela Lugosi. So and it's one of Bela Lugosi's best performances.
Oh, okay.
Like, when you see it, you're going to see how much of this movie informs Young Frankenstein.
Okay.
Like, they took so much of... Mel Brooks took so much of Son of Frankenstein and put it into Young Frankenstein. It's going to delight you. It's also an oddball because it's like the only Universal monster movie that isn't like 60 minutes long. It's actually like an hour and 40 minutes. It's like a real movie length.
Hey, great. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Some beautiful set designs too. Like they go back to like German expressionism with like some of the set pieces. It's just an interesting one from an era where they made a lot of sequels, but clearly no one really was sure how to make a sequel yet.
Right.
So like we'll go back to like when the first era of shared universe franchising. So that'll be fun.
That's great.
And then after that, it'll be your pick again. So I recommend you start thinking about it now.
Yeah, I think my next pick will be actually pretty good.
Yeah. Well, you're on an upward climb.
But Sam, it's just you go up so high and you just come right back down. It's like Icarus, right? The wings are eventually going to melt off.
I'm not having it. This next one, this is your Born to Run. Like, Springsteen didn't hit it big till his third studio album, man.
Yeah, I guess.
You're going to get there, man. The next movie you pick, I Believe in You, is going to have like a sick 3-minute saxophone solo.
Whoa. That's a tall order. Well, then I gotta try and search for one.
This is the path I've put you on. You are the Bruce Springsteen of this podcast.
And my next pick, Sam, is going to be Species 3. No, it's not. That's not going to be my next pick.
Is anyone in that movie?
I don't know. I have no idea. I haven't even seen
Did they get Michael
2.
Madsen back for the third one?
The era of direct-to-DVD movies that, I guess now is just direct-to-streaming.
Yeah, pretty much. Even real movies are direct-to-streaming.
It's true. There's no distinction between...
That Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot just went straight to Netflix, and I think they at least thought that was going to be a real movie. Oh, Will, you got to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
I know. I got to actually watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1. I have to admit, I've never seen it.
Oh, you've never seen it? Well, we'll get to when we get to Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, not to be confused with Leatherface that came much later. Right. You can watch the first 2 as well. That'll give you context, maybe, sort of, not really.
Yeah, it was one of those that was like always when it was written about, it was always like, this is the scariest fucking movie you've ever seen, and I was always too much of a wimp to like check it out when I was younger, and then it just kind of fell out of my orbit.
I'd put it up there with Night of the Living Dead as like, you know, it's a product of its time, but
Yeah.
I will also say it looks like a snuff film for most of it, and
Yeah.
it's effective. And part 2, to Tobe Hooper's credit, is not trying to play the hits. He's like, no, I'm going to go in a completely different direction. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2 is basically if someone made Night of the Living Dead for their first movie and then Evil Dead 2 for the sequel.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Even better.
You will not be disappointed. But now that we've spent all that time talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre, thank you everyone for listening in. I hope you get a chance to check out A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. Not Nightmare on Elm Street 3 The Dream Warriors. They dropped the, which I had to keep correcting myself when searching for it. But yes, as always, thank you all for listening. You can check us out on Twitter at Podcast Part 3. That's the number 3. And Will, anything to say before we sign off?
In my dreams, I am beautiful, but also bad.
I am the Wizard Master. I am the Wizard Master.
I guess that's what I should have done with my nasally voice. Oh well.
I'll do your nasally voice for you.
Yeah, there you
What are
go.
friends for? All right, everyone. Have a good night. See you next week.